Chrissy, would you please call the roll?
Calling the roll, Mr. Jones,
Here.
Ms. Conwell,
Here.
Ms. Brown,
Here.
Mr. Schron. Mr. Schron is absent. Mr. Miller,
Here.
we have a quorum.
Excellent. Chrissy, has anyone signed in for public comment related to the agenda?
No, Mr. Chair, no one has signed in for comment related to the agenda.
All right. Can we have a motion to approve our minutes from the October 5th, 2016 meeting?
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. All right. Matters referred to committee, at this time we have none, but we have a discussion and a presentation on our calendar this morning. And our first discussion is regarding the Emerald Development and Economic Development Network Incorporated contract. And Director Ruth Gillette, if you would please come forward.
Good afternoon, Council Committee. I brought a PowerPoint to kind of walk through, but I don't see it. Do I have to do something? No.
And just to set this up, Director Gillette has requested that we have first reading adoption on our next council meeting. But just so that we could have discussion, we are hearing it in committee today in terms of discussion.
That's correct. And in fact, that was really my opening, is to thank you for giving me this opportunity to present this information and for considering this item possibly for introduction and suspension of rules to approve at the October 24th council meeting. The context for this expedited request relates to the community initiative to end youth homelessness. And so this is what I was going to kind of fill you in on a little bit as a prelude to really going into the details of the contract. So the process that the community is pursuing relative to ending youth homelessness includes that in the spring, an organization called Away Home America invited communities to apply for a 100-day challenge. The Sisters of Charity Foundation and an organization called A Place for Me, which is housed in the YWCA, responded to this invitation to submit an application with the support of other community providers, including Department of Children and Family Services, the Office of Homeless Services, Job and Family Services, Eden, Frontline Services, and the YWCA, with the result that Cleveland was one of 3 cities that was chosen nationally to be part of this, this 100-day challenge to end youth homelessness. So there's a local leadership team that set a goal that going forward there will be no youths exited from county care to homelessness in Cuyahoga County. So this means that there will be protocol changes and policy changes within DCFS to assure that youth leaving, being emancipated from county care will have a stable housing option available to them in all cases. And that's a pretty significant kind of goal to make. And so there's a lot of work on that. And that overall, youth leaving foster care and any unstably housed or homeless youth in Cuyahoga County will be linked with permanent housing. So those are significant goals, and the idea is that within 100 days we will have the team and community input to develop a strategy and a structure to assure that those goals can be achieved. So the 100-day challenge is, we're being provided technical assistance by an organization called the Rapids Results Institute that is providing technical assistance and is helping our community build teams of relationships, identify protocols and processes that need to be in place. However, there are no resources that are available. So I should, the record is No Money in This Deal by George Jones. I don't actually know that song, but I'm sure somebody does. Anyway, so there's no money to implement anything except in Cuyahoga County, we are very, very fortunate because we were awarded 2 HUD grants out of last year's Continuum of Care application process that provides cash rental assistance. 2 awards, one was to Cuyahoga County, which is the contract, and one was directly to Eden. And the amount that the county contract is $716,000, and Eden's was 1.2 million. And we'll go into more detail about how that will be spent. But the bottom line is that basically, if you're going to be providing housing, you need some kind of resource to pay the rent. So the Eden contract, it's 100% funded by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. HUD has fast-tracked this grant agreement to our community so that we're able to start this contract as of October 1st, and likewise with Eden's new grant. It will enable rapid rehousing money to be available for homeless youth. The good news is our community has been implementing a rapid rehousing program for families for the past 4 years. So we have a structure in place. Additional funding has been provided to Eden through a Sisters of Charity grant to provide special staff to help the youth find housing and maintain housing. And in addition, Eden has been trying to develop a list of landlords who are willing to rent to young people. As we know, not everyone would be willing to do that. So the program components specific are not on the slide, but are in your handout. And it looks like this, and it includes the criteria for these grants, which also will serve single adults and, on the Eden side, families. But both grants do permit us to serve youth, which is the key component. So if you looked at what this gives you the information specifically about the rental assistance that will be offered. People are required to sign a lease, which is a HUD requirement. A security deposit will be provided, and for youth, up to 4 months of rent. And the thought with rapid rehousing is that within the time that you're having 100% subsidy on your rent, you're able to, secure a job, begin to save money, and be able to take over that rent at the time that the subsidy ends. We are looking at, including shared housing as an option for people. In other words, if I have a friend or a sister or brother or cousin that would also, they would also have to sign a lease, that would reduce the portion of rent that I would have to pay. We're trying to figure out how to incorporate that into the program. And then case management is required by the HUD grant. However, it's case management light. And we realize that for youth to maintain their housing, there will probably need to be other case management that is provided. In terms of the numbers served, I've listed both awards. The county award is expected to serve 160 adults, 65 youth, and no families out of our grant, although we serve families through other HUD funding. And then Eden has identified in their application that they will serve 222 adults, 83 youth, and 50 families. So that's to give you an idea of the scope of, the number of people that we feel will be minimally assisted with the subsidies in these awards. And I think that's it. Jen Fleiderer is here from Eden if you have any questions. This is really an exciting opportunity for our community. The criteria that you have in your handout has been developed through a community subcommittee, committee of people who indicated they wanted to be involved in that conversation. And so that is yet to be formally adopted by the advisory board, but we are working to be able to present that to the board on November the 3rd for approval.
Any questions from the committee? Councilwoman?
Through the chair to director, in 2015, the amounts for the awards were 716. So I'm kind of confused. That was in 2015. Do we still have that money?
To the chair, to Councilman Conwell. So the award was announced in like January or March of 2016. So we're just now in the position of putting it into a contract. HUD has been running behind.
So it's the same amounts that you quoted on that slide?
Yes, that is the amount. This is the first time. These are both new awards to the community.
So the amounts are less than what was stated that you received, so what will be done with the remaining funds?
Okay, so on the number served, that's just the funds out of those grants that are targeted to rent assistance. And then the other amount in both of those grants will go to support the housing location services and the case management services.
And then I had another question on another slide. I'm trying to. It's coming to me.
That's all right.
My concern, and it's probably not the question, but before I forget, the concern I did have, I attended one of the SASH meetings, and I got an update from Levine's meeting the other day. This is great, any funding is great, but I still don't think that it's meeting, I'm just wondering, it's not meeting the needs of those individuals because it's an income base. And we're still not able to allocate funding for those females that those 12 that are in the shelter now that are actually making more than this. So I don't know if we can incorporate that some kind of way, but I'm really concerned about that. These income levels are still knocking them out from moving on. They're right there, and they just need that little push to be out on their own. So, can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, through the chair to Councilman Conwell, when we've talked about this, I guess the context within which we look at the assistance. First of all, these are HUD grants, and they have determined the eligibility based on 30%, actually 29% of AMI. I think that, the reality is that there's so many people in our community that fall into that category that to develop a program that assists people, out of special funds. On the one hand, those individuals could apply to CMHA for housing and certainly be housed if they were willing to wait because CMHA does not have that low of a threshold of income eligibility. So I think, to me, the issue is that people are very willing to help people who need help, but it has to be, when the resources are so limited, you'd have to look at like serving the deepest need before you served people with less need. I think so that's really my response. I guess I don't know. Are you thinking that there should be a special, like, levy set aside for, like, people?
Maybe not a levy, but, because we already have the Health and Human Service levy, but maybe your department could look at what could that possibly, that special fund look like to assist individuals that we know right now, we have 12, at least 12 on the rolls. How we can look at that in 2018 and actually have some money there for when those cases, and it wouldn't have to be like we're subsidizing rent for month after month. They already have a job that is knocking them out of income eligibility for any of these programs, so that means they make enough to.
To the chair, to Councilman Conwell, I'll be the devil's advocate here. You know, technically, you could look at the fact that they're living in a shelter as already we're subsidizing their income to enable them to save money for a security deposit. You know, they have no living expenses at this point. Their food is provided, their housing is provided. I guess, you know, again, as the devil's advocate, I would say, you know, is there really a public responsibility to provide an additional subsidy or incentive to them to leave shelter? I mean, I think every case is unique, certainly, you know. So, we could maybe look at that I hear you. So.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I'm a taxpayer as well.
Yeah.
But I know that most times, probably 85% of the time, it's not just the income. There's other barriers that go along with that person being in that shelter. So they might be capable of holding a job and making that money. But it might be something else that's alcohol, mental health issues, whatever the case may be, domestic violence. It's not. So I think they would be great candidates for maybe the shared program.
Well, that's a good idea. That wouldn't require a subsidy per se. They could just be tried to match up.
Okay, thank you. My
Thank
other
you.
question will come back.
Okay.
Dr. Gillette, who were the other two cities that also won?
Austin, Texas, and I think it was Los Angeles, California. Is that right? Is it
Councilman-
yes, it was
Councilman
Los
Miller?
Angeles, California.
Councilman Miller.
Mr. Chairman, Director, I get the sense that this 100-day program and these two HUD grants came along independent of each other.
To the chair, to Councilman Miller, yes, it was serendipity.
And so there's it's not obvious that these grants are in the right amount to meet the need. Do we know whether these HUD grants are provide enough money so that we can in fact end youth homelessness as is the goal of the 100-day program?
Through the chair to Councilman Miller, we do track the number of youth that are homeless in the shelter system. And I would say that, over a year period, I didn't bring those numbers with me, but I can send them to you after the meeting. I believe there's maybe 120 youth over a year's time that access the shelter system. I believe that utilizing these resources will really enable us to end homelessness for youth that are coming into the shelter system. The 100-day challenge also looks at the youth leaving foster care, and since they're not homeless, we're looking for other resources to support their housing. And that's why working with DCFS is really great, because they're aware of the resources that are available in that system that could be utilized in this way. And so we've had discussions with Director Pristow and Cindy Weiskettle, Director Weiskettle, about, carving out resources that would be subcontracted to Eden to be used for youth that would be able to access for rapid exit and prevention from that funding stream.
The 2 federal grants, are these a one-time shot, or are we going to be able to get these grants multiple times?
Through the chair to Councilman Miller. Historically, these are renewed annually once they are approved. Since we have an election this year and, one candidate has indicated he would eliminate HUD, we never really know what's going to happen, right, at the federal level. But presumably, these will be renewed going forward.
Okay, well, whoever that is, let's hope that that person is not elected. My final question is, do you have programs in place that evaluate the effectiveness of these programs?
Through the chair to Councilman Miller. The short answer is yes. Each program is required to enter data into HMIS that identifies client outcomes in terms of permanent housing and tracking also returns to shelter. So we are able to develop that information. The test of the success of the program is that people are housed, they leave homelessness quickly, and that they are housed and that they remain housed. And we are able to track those outcomes through the data that is provided in the system. And I can share that information with council as we are moving through the year, if you'd like. Thank you.
Any further questions from the committee? No. All right. If there are no further questions, we will thank you. And we will again look for a first reading passage at that time.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. At this time, we have a presentation and overview of the Cuyahoga County Board of Developmental Disabilities, and Ms. Kelly Petty.
Good afternoon, Councilman Jones and members of the Health, Human Services, and Aging Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to be here this afternoon to share some information about the Board of Developmental Disabilities and some of the key issues that we are facing. Our mission is to support and empower people with disabilities to live, learn, work, and play in the community. And like all boards of DD in Ohio, the Cuyahoga County Board of Developmental Disabilities was founded in 1967, therefore making next year, 2017, our 50th anniversary year. Nearly 60% of our annual budget comes from a 3.9 mil continuing tax levy that was passed back in 2005. Most of the remaining part of our budget comes from the federal Medicaid program, which I'll share more information about. We serve individuals across their lifespan, literally from birth through death, and in natural environments whenever possible. We currently provide both direct services and what we call support administration, what Medicaid calls case management. Our services are person-centered and comprehensive and include early intervention, children's, assistive technology, adult and employment services, behavioral and health care, forensics, transportation, and we investigate major unusual incidents. Partnerships are essential to our service delivery model, both with private service provider agencies and other county agencies, as you will see in a later slide. This just gives you a little bit of an overview of where our locations are throughout the county to show that we do have a strong presence throughout the county. And it's noteworthy that this does not include residential locations, which number in the hundreds throughout the county. The need for our services continues to grow. This slide shows that we've seen a 44% increase in the number of people served on an annual basis over the last 10 years. And it's important to note that's an annual count of people. If you look at our daily count of number of people enrolled with us on any given day, it hovers around 9,000. But our annual year-to-date number so far this year is about 13,000. Despite the need for services continuing to grow, our revenue is declining. We've seen a 14% or 14.5% decrease in the amount of revenue generated by our levy that passed back in 2005 since that time. It initially was generating about $117 million a year. This year, our projected levy revenue is, we're hoping it's about 103, but it may be less than that. And that was actually better news than we were anticipating right up until just a few weeks ago. Additionally, our state revenue has remained flat. We do receive some minimal funding from the State Department of Developmental Disabilities, but that has remained stable at only about 5% of our annual budget for about the last 10 years. Back in the early 2000s, we began to make a very concerted effort to take our local levy funding and use those funds to leverage federal Medicaid funds in the way of what's called a Medicaid home and community-based services waiver, which we now utilize to a great extent to fund services and supports for people. Basically what that means is that for every 40 cents that we spend out of local levy dollars, we're able to draw down 60 cents in federal Medicaid dollars and provide $1's worth of service to an individual. So in 2015, we spent $41 million, or about 40% of our levy revenue, on what we call this local Medicaid match obligation. We expect in 2016 that's going to rise to about $43 million. On average, 33% of our annual revenue comes from Medicaid. We have about 4,144 individuals enrolled on Medicaid waivers right now. That number goes up monthly. And despite that, we still have 2,200 people in this county who are waiting for some type of Medicaid waiver. We believe that our funding has a significant impact on this, a significant economic impact on this community. And just to demonstrate, for all of the individuals who are enrolled in a Medicaid waiver, we take that $41 million that I mentioned of local levy dollars, that actually draws down $112 million in services and supports for people with disabilities. And the money goes mostly to about 100 different local agencies who in turn employ thousands of people who are, of course, then taxpayers and homeowners, et cetera. So it's a, our budget reflects $41 million, but that actually has a very large economic impact for this entire community. We also use Medicaid waivers at times to partner with other county agencies and have enrolled individuals on a waiver who might be involved in dual systems or multi-systems, so that those other agencies can also see the benefit of this leveraging of the local funds to draw down federal Medicaid funds. And it is without a doubt that without this Medicaid waiver program and our ability to leverage these funds, we would not be able to serve nearly as many people as we do in this community. We also realize efficiencies and cost savings with some of our partnerships with other county departments. And just to highlight a few of these, we are a very close partner with Help Me Grow in providing our early intervention services. Their staff are housed in our buildings right alongside our early intervention staff. They work together to provide an evidence-based team approach. It's been a wonderful partnership having them right alongside our staff, and we are achieving the desired outcomes in that program in which a high percentage of children leave that program at age 3, having met their developmental milestones, which of course is our goal. Also, the Department of Children and Family Services, earlier this year, we entered into an agreement with them recognizing that sometimes when a child with a developmental disability has to be removed from their family home and placed in residential treatment or placement, sometimes there are extraordinary costs that go along with that developmental disability that wouldn't exist with the typical or non-disabled individuals. So we have agreed to pay for those extraordinary costs when they exist. And then the last example I want to give is just with Jobs and Family Services. You may not be aware, but we have for about 10 years now had a partnership with them where we provide 2 Medicaid units in our buildings, one in East Cleveland, one in Parma. And those units are dedicated to Medicaid eligibility for individuals enrolled on Medicaid waivers and living in DD facilities. And we pay for one unit, they pay for the other. It's been a wonderful partnership in which we've seen a dramatic decline in the number of people who lose their Medicaid eligibility, which of course is very traumatic. If they lose their eligibility, they lose their waiver, they lose their services, and we have to start all over again. So this has been a wonderful way to avoid that. And also, we're able to get people enrolled on waivers initially in a much more expeditious way. The DD system, locally and across the country, is undergoing a significant transformation. Quickly share with you that there are 3 policy initiatives or national trends that are influencing the change in our system. These initiatives are all pushing us in the same general direction. First, the Olmstead decision, which dates back to 1999, was a U.S. Supreme Court decision that says that people with disabilities have the right to receive their services in the community in the least restrictive setting possible. The Department of Justice enforces the Olmstead decision, and they have in very recent years been around to various states citing findings that they believe those states are in violation of Olmstead and are not doing enough to provide services or opportunities for services in the community for people with developmental disabilities. So that's something that is highly impacting us. Employment First in 2012. Employment First is actually a state of Ohio term. It was an executive order signed by Governor Kasich that says that community employment should be a priority and the preferred outcome for working age Ohioans with disabilities. Despite the fact that this is an Ohio initiative, 45 other states have very similar initiatives in place right now, and so I consider that to be a national trend as well. And then the CMS rules. CMS stands for Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. As their name suggests, they govern the Medicaid program across the country. And because we utilize so much Medicaid funding, we do have to follow their rules. They issued some new and updated rules in 2014. One that's very significant that I'm going to talk about in a moment is about conflict-free case management. The other, though, is very similar to the Olmstead decision in that they identified that because people are receiving services under what's called a home and community-based services waiver, they felt that states were not always truly providing those services in a community setting. So there's a much greater emphasis on community integration, settings being community-based. So these initiatives are all designed to really increase opportunities for people to be spending more time in their community, to become a true member of their community, to be truly integrated in their community, but also the possibility of being employed in their community. This slide I'm going to go past, but it just has a little bit more information about, a little more detail about Employment First. As I said, 45 states have initiatives that are very similar to ours. And then turning to this rule, the conflict-free case management rule is very much impacting boards of developmental disabilities across Ohio. And it's a rather complicated issue, but basically what the federal government has said is that a single entity, and in our case, that being a county board of developmental disabilities, but a single entity cannot be both a provider of service and administer services as well. And we, of course, do both of those things right now. We provide support administration, as I mentioned, which is the administrative function, but we are also still a direct service provider. The federal government views that as a conflict of interest, and they have issued a rule that says that they're no longer going to permit entities to do both of those things. Our state director, Director Martin, the director of the Ohio Department of Developmental Disabilities, negotiated with CMS a 10-year transition for Ohio, which we were supposed to only have 5 years. So he was able to negotiate a 10-year transition, which is better, meaning that we have to come into compliance with this by March of 2024. And the implication for county boards in Ohio is that we will no longer be able to be direct service providers. We have chosen unanimously as a system that it's more important for us to play the role of the administrator, because that's the way that we control and authorize those local dollars that get put up as Medicaid match. So it was very important for us to maintain that function. We didn't necessarily want to give up either of those functions, but we felt if we had to choose, that's where we were going to go. So the rule impacts adult services, employment services, and transportation services. We currently provide all of those things. But just to give you a sense, we're not the only provider currently for adult services and employment services. Those services are already being provided at the rate of about 50% by private providers. So we're doing about 50%, they're doing about 50%. For transportation, the County Board of DD is only currently providing services to about 28% of people. The remaining 72% is already being provided in the private sector. So we've already, since we learned of this rule, we've already started making this kind of movement. And then also just to emphasize, this rule does not change or impact the need for these services. These same kinds of services are going to need to be continue to be provided to people with developmental disabilities. They're going to continue to need them, and we, the county board, are going to have to continue to pay for those services via the Medicaid waiver match. It's the only thing that's changing is who will be providing them. This will move entirely to the private sector for the provision of services. So, of course, this has required a lot of planning on our part to think about what is our future going to look like. We did put together 4 different task forces as part of a strategic planning initiative that we call Vision 2024. We plan to have a new strategic plan published in January. But what I really want to share is one of the things that came out of this planning process is a timeline for our future, which does show that the bulk of this privatization effort for adult services and employment will occur sometime in the year 2020. That's the date that we have targeted for our board that makes the most sense for us to do that in the year 2020. Transportation will actually transition sooner than that because they are, as I mentioned, they're actually further along towards privatization already. And then what is the fiscal impact of some of these changes? We are using what we call our sustainability fund, our savings. We knew when we passed our levy back in 2005 that during the first few years of that levy, we would likely generate more revenue than we needed to spend. And so we intentionally saved that money knowing that the revenue would start to decline. And now we are tapping into that sustainability fund to meet our needs. We do see that with some of these initiatives towards more opportunities for employment, more opportunities for community integration. We don't have all the facts and figures yet, but we believe there's a cost there that may be greater than what we've experienced in the past, and our private providers are concerned about that as well. And so we're trying to keep track of that to see if that is in fact the case. We want to maintain our, as I said, we have a very comprehensive continuum of services that are not impacted by this rule change. We have reduced our staff significantly since 2010. in an attempt to control our expenditures, to get it to not have to tap into that sustainability fund as much or for as long. And that's something that we will continue to have to do next year as well. We have to address our waiting list and our emergency needs. Despite our decline in revenue, we still have people who come to us almost every single day who are truly in an emergency kind of situation, who need services and supports right away. And so, we have to be able to address those needs when they come to us. We recognize that when we do privatize, that bulk of the privatization in 2020 will result in some significant cost savings because we will no longer employ the staff involved in providing those direct services. However, it's important to know that there is also a corresponding loss in revenue when that occurs. We, as a Medicaid provider of direct services, we bill the Medicaid waiver on a daily basis for those services that we currently provide. So once we discontinue that, we also will lose the revenue that goes along with it. So there will be a cost savings, but there will also be a drop in revenue when that time comes. We're also evaluating our buildings. As I showed you on the map, we have a number of different facilities around the county, and we're looking to see if perhaps in order to stabilize some of our finances, we could use some of those buildings more efficiently in the future. And then lastly, just to leave you with, we will continue to be a vital part of this county's health and human services system. A lot of people ask me, when this privatization happens, they say, so what are you going to be? And that question concerns me greatly because we are still a very important member of this community in terms of services and supports for people with disabilities. One, we will continue to have to be the funder of those services through the Medicaid waivers, but we will have to provide that 40% match, and that number, as I mentioned, continues to grow. We also will continue to provide, again, that continuum of services that are not impacted by this rule. Early intervention services, supports to schools, transition age services, all the things that aren't impacted by the rule, we will continue to provide. We also, a very large part of who we will be is that case management or support administration function. Those staff members authorize services, provide service coordination to people, help hook them up with literally their hopes and dreams and the kinds of lives that they want to be living, and they use that Medicaid waiver funding in order to pay for the services and supports that they need to make that happen, but that support administrator needs to be there to help them. We also intend to provide technical assistance and support to our private provider community. We know there is some concern about quality once this privatization happens. We are a very well thought of entity in this county. Families trust us. Families have enjoyed sending their sons and daughters to our programs for 40 or more years, and they are very concerned about the idea of a private provider sort of coming in and taking over that operation. And so we plan to do some initiatives to support and provide some technical assistance to make sure that our private providers are delivering as high quality services as possible. We will also facilitate key initiatives in the county that and in the state that apply to people with developmental disabilities and promote advocacy and self-determination, and again, continue to advance the reputation of people with disabilities in this community. So we view all of those things as, continuing to be a vital role for our agency going forward. I want to thank you for your continued support of the Board of Developmental Disabilities, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for the presentation. Tell me, the 3.9 mil continuing levy, how long is it? Is it a 20-year?
It's continuing. It has no end.
No end.
Correct. Prior to 2005, we were on a 5-year levy cycle. And so every 5 years, our levy would expire and we would have to go back to the voters. We would talk to the then county commissioners about, can this be a renewal or a replacement or additional? But we had to go back to the voters and get a yes approval to have the levy re-upped, so to speak.
So you
In
don't have to-
2005, it was turned into a continuing levy.
So you never have to go back to the ballot.
We never have to, but we are concerned about that decline. A lot of that decline has been some of the state initiatives. The loss of tangible personal property tax, I think, has caused us to lose about $9 million a year in local property tax levy or revenue. And so we are concerned about that, but it's true, our levy does not expire.
Okay. What does it generate on a, I guess, annual basis?
Yes.
In terms of dollars, what does it generate?
Oh, what does it generate now? Well, we were bearing up for it only to generate $101 million this year. But I think just within the last couple weeks, we got some good news that it's probably going to be more like 103. We were hoping for more than that, though. We keep hoping that the levy revenue is going to start to tick back up, but it just has not.
Any questions from the committee? Councilwoman Conwell.
So through the chair to CEO, President Petty, the funding, I'm trying to get this straight in my head. So right now you're transitioning. So I believe we give millions of dollars from the HHS fund. I mean, we're mandated by the state to provide those funds to you guys. So as you're transitioning from administrator/provider, I'm not sure how that's going to look as far as administration, because I know what all you guys do. So won't be doing services. So exactly, paint me a picture exactly what is administration type duties that you're moving to.
Okay. Well, first of all, we do not get any of your Health and Human Services levy dollars. We don't get any of that. We only get what is generated from our 3.9 mil levy. So what will this look like after we privatize? Well, again, we still have a comprehensive range of services that are not going away, that are not impacted by these Medicaid rules. Early intervention, for example, we provide early intervention services to, on average, 1,200 children on any given day throughout the year. That is not at all impacted by this change. We provide technical assistance to every school district in the county for school-age supports, behavioral intervention for those schools. We provide curriculum support, assistive technology support, other therapy support for those school districts upon their request.
How many school districts? across
They're
the
all
county?
31, yes. Some use us more than others. Some don't. Some have gotten pretty good at supporting children with developmental disabilities and don't really access us all that often anymore. Some probably should access more than they do.
Give us a sense of which ones do and don't, or don't.
I'm gonna
if
ask
that's-
my-
If that's the smaller number.
My COO, do you know Jackie?
Sure, I can share just.
This is Jackie Kaspereisen, our Chief Operations Officer.
You can come in and state your name for the record.
Sure. Jackie Kaspereisen, Chief Operations Officer, Cuyahoga County Board of DD. Our relationship with all 31 of the school districts has been in this technical support place since the mid-90s. So as Kelly was mentioning, the requests from all 31 of the districts has ebbed and flowed over the course of all of that time as the districts themselves have enhanced their abilities to serve a wide range of students with developmental disabilities. We have a big presence in the larger districts, as you can imagine, the Parmas, the Lakewoods, smaller presence in the smaller districts with East Cleveland, Richmond Heights, Cuyahoga Heights. But there's 5 separate teams of people, like Kelly again identified, behavior supports. We provide less of those types of supports in a Parma, for example. They have their own resources, but they use us a great deal for what we call assistive technology types of supports.
Does the city of Cleveland use you?
Oh, gosh, yes. Yes, they're a big recipient of all 5 of those teams of services. And we partner a little bit uniquely with Cleveland, too, in that they have what they consider an assistive technology team that supports individuals with developmental disabilities. So we work even in a closer partnership with Cleveland because they have established teams in that way.
Thank you.
Sure.
And Councilwoman.
Oh, you're fine.
So those are what our children services supports look like. Those will continue. We provide services to transition age youth. When they get to be about age 14 in school, we start to get more involved with their team and start talking about employment outcomes that they could potentially be working on for when they graduate. And just that transition out of high school tends to be a very difficult time for people. We also will continue to provide forensic services. We work in all the different court systems around the county, work with individuals that have developmental disabilities that are involved in the court system. We will continue to investigate major unusual incidents, but really one of the big things that we will provide is this service and support administration. So as I mentioned, we have about 4,150 people or so that are enrolled on Medicaid waivers. By law, those people have to have a support administrator assigned to them. It's like a service coordinator. There are more people than that have a support administrator assigned, but the people enrolled on waivers have to have one. So they do things, they sit down with the person and really plan together, what is it that you want to do with your life? How can we utilize your Medicaid waiver to get you the needed services and support so that you can live life the way you want to? The great thing about those Medicaid waivers is it allows people a great amount of choice and autonomy in their life, so they can choose where they live, who they live with, who their service provider is going to be, what they do during the day, again, who's their service provider. But it can get complicated too, so that service or support administrator is there to help coordinate everything and make sure the person is aware of all the different available resources that might be able to help them. But then they also authorize the budget of that Medicaid waiver. So there's some controls that are within our staff have those controls. So that's a very important reason why we wanted to maintain that function. But that will become a very big part of who we are going forward.
Will you help the families, when you talk about supportive administrating, when it privatizes, will you help the families connect?
Oh, absolutely. We just held it's not the first time we've done it. On Saturday, we held a provider fair. A large presence of our support administrators were on hand to assist families who are there, because there's a lot to take in. There are a lot of service providers. They tend to all look the same if you don't know what questions to ask. So they're very helpful in helping them navigate through all that, knowing what to ask, knowing what to look for, and just helping families to think about, what is it that I really want for my son or daughter? Because sometimes they haven't really thought about it in that way.
And so I know for many of the clients, you have IHPs, so you will still be in those kind of meetings, even though
Yes.
the
Absolutely.
private organizations are there.
Absolutely. Yes.
And so I'm assuming that the CMS rule is those three things that this is how this is going to impact this.
Adult services,
The
employment services, and transportation
Do you have the
services.
amounts of how much each of those cost?
I do,
and
currently.
And that will all be savings off of your budget, even though I
Correct.
know you said.
I have the
it's gonna
amount, I have the
impact some-
projected amount of revenue loss also. So currently for those three areas, adult services, employment services, and transportation, if we were to privatize today, the savings in salary and benefits would be approximately $39 million. And then the approximate loss of revenue would be about 25 million of that. So it's still a significant savings, but it's not the entire it's not the entire amount that will be saved.
Thank you.
What happened, if anything, or what was the reason? Why was the rule made to separate administrative and providing services?
I think that again, from the federal governments where they sit, what they see, Ohio is unique in that we have this county board system where it's actually a government agency that's a provider of services. In most other states, things did not develop that way. So for example, you might have a Goodwill or an ARC that is a big provider of services, much in the way that we are here in Ohio. And so with some of these private entities, that I think the feds felt that there really was a conflict of interest, because you had say Goodwill. I shouldn't necessarily pick on Goodwill. They're just the one name that I can think of, that they would be like writing the service plan, authorizing the dollars, and delivering the services. And so there's a potential there. If you need more services, you get to bill for more revenue. So they're just making this blanket statement across the country that they view that as a conflict, and that the same entity cannot do both of those functions. Unfortunately for Ohio, we were not able to make our case with them that we should be treated differently. It's a different scenario. I think they just didn't want to, they just want to treat everybody the same. We did look at, some legal arguments, and back in, right before our Director Martin made that negotiated 10-year agreement, we had a few ideas about some legal arguments with CMS, but it never came to fruition.
Any further questions from the committee? Yes. Councilman Miller.
Mr. Chairman, Director, how much is your current reserve balance?
It is, we will end the year at about $89 million.
Okay, 89 million estimated for 12/31/16. And what's the estimate for the difference between revenue and expenditures for 2016?
For 2016, about $12 million.
In the wrong direction.
In the wrong direction. Same trend for next year.
And now, you said eventually when you complete the shift to private providers in the three main areas, that it would produce a $39 million savings and a $25 million revenue loss. Does this mean that this is going to create a positive variance of $14 million annually in your account?
We believe so. It's a ways off, but yes, we believe that can happen.
So that might enable you to stabilize the situation and
Yes.
not. If
Correct.
if you factored that in, you'd be at +2 for 2016.
Right.
So maybe this will enable you to get it in balance.
Correct. And we have, we've just, well, you were at one of my presentations, and we've identified this 2020 date. But we, it could have to be sooner than that to help with that exact situation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councilwoman?
To the chair, are there enough providers to accommodate for all these three services? For all the number
Yeah,
of
good question.
individuals?
We're actually very fortunate here in Cuyahoga County. There are counties that are struggling with that, really struggling, especially with transportation providers. We do not have that. In fact, we feel like at times we have too many providers. It's an overwhelming choice, and some of them maybe, aren't all that knowledgeable about what they're doing.
Okay.
But yes, there is the capacity. We talk with our provider community more about capability. We want to make sure, we are a little concerned about some of the individuals with the highest needs that we do serve in our centers right now, people with significant medical issues, significant physical disabilities, or significant behavioral challenges. We want to make sure that our provider community is capable of supporting those individuals, but there definitely is just the capacity out there.
And I always thought this came about through the state, but you're saying it was more of a push from the federal
Yes.
level? So was there any conversation or thought in regards to the individuals losing out on their familiarity and things that they were used to, and the actual safety of the individual? Because like you stated,
Right.
you've been doing this business for years versus new private entities popping up 'cause you have to have patience dealing, and you know,
Right.
dealing with this population. So was that any consideration?
I can't say that it was not at all thought about or concerned about. I think there was not a willingness by our state government to push back on this idea of privatization. And therefore, regardless of how the various county boards felt about it, there just was not going to be a big pushback. I think that in our own local planning process, we have identified just that we've had individuals have been attending our centers for 40 years or more. They're good places, they're safe places, they're accessible places, they're clean, they're well-maintained. People like going to them, people feel comfortable going to them. So it is important to us that if at all possible, we keep those places. And our intention is to then engage with a private provider to come into those buildings and therefore at least maintain that amount of continuity for people so they can go to the same place. That is almost the number one concern people had in this whole process. They like that place. They want to continue to send their sons and daughters to Rocky River AAC, Southwest AAC, or whichever one it happens to be. So that was very important to us in planning for this.
Thank you.
And Councilwoman Conwell asked a question earlier about visualizing what you're administering. And maybe you can repeat that answer for me again. I know the things that were not impacted, like early intervention and the work with the school districts, forensic work, but describe again what the administrative part that you do will look like.
Sure. So when someone's enrolled in a Medicaid waiver, there is a state law requiring that they have this support administrator assigned to work with them to provide service coordination. They also authorize their budget. So people enrolled on a waiver, they go through an assessment that identifies a funding level that they qualify for based on their needs, and then it's the support administrator's job to help them understand, these are your needs, these are what you say, this is what you say you want, but you're only qualifying for this amount of funding, so we have to be able to find a way for you to get it. Maybe you can't live by yourself. You have to share your services with someone else and share that so that your budget goes further. But part of their job is to sort of control that budget so that everyone on a waiver isn't getting $100,000 a year worth of services. But more importantly, their job is to work with either that individual or the individual and family to really help them identify what is it that you want out of life, because you have a great opportunity here with this Medicaid waiver. It can fund residential services, it can fund day services, you can use it how you want to live, and that's a great thing, but it can sometimes be a little overwhelming for people to just figure out on their own. So the support administrator will be helping with that, but at the same time, they will authorize the service level so that it doesn't exceed what they're entitled to. And then they also follow up and monitor those services after they've been identified. So for instance, this concern with moving to private providers, a support administrator would be required to go out and see the person at their service location and monitor that they really are receiving the services that the provider says they were going to provide, and that the person is, generally satisfied with them. It's a big job, it's a complicated job, and every individual person is different. And so the support administrator really has to know how to ask questions and really listen to people, but sometimes people aren't always even ready to have that conversation. And so they really have to know, for each family, every situation is different and how to start. But it is an amazing opportunity for someone when they're enrolled in a Medicaid waiver. Like I said, they have a lot of choice, a lot of autonomy, and they're hopefully going to be able to live life the way that they want to.
Are there any other questions? Councilwoman?
And I always get one after somebody else says something, through the chair. The language in the original levy in 1967 will not be impacted anyway because of these changes, will it?
No, I don't believe that our levy language has changed. And there has been a lot, I can get you more information, there has been a lot of research done on that because many county boards, the smaller county boards, they might have just one facility in their county and their levy language actually names it by name. Sometimes it's named after a person or a parent, a founding parent. And so those counties were concerned once they privatize or it's not called that anymore, does that negate their levy? So there has been a lot of legal research done on that and determined that we're okay. I can get you that. It was Bricker and Eckler, located here in Cleveland, that did a lot of that research. I believe ours, it doesn't mention buildings by name, but it does talk about operating facilities for individuals with developmental disabilities.
Yeah, I was wondering if it mentioned like, if it stated adult services, employments, what you would provide for
I
the
don't believe
person.
it does. I believe it just says services and supports for people with disabilities.
Okay.
Good question.
Are there any further questions from the committee? If not, well, Mrs. Petty, we thank you very much.
Thank
for
you
the
very
presen-
much for the opportunity.
Yes, and we look forward to hearing more over the years how the transition
Thank you.
goes.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go Tribe.
That's right, go try it. That's right. All right. Is there any miscellaneous business from the committee? No? Chrissy, has anyone signed in for other public comment?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Ms. Lou.
Yes.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Afternoon.
Thank you for having me again. And earlier, we had OHS, Ms. Gillette, coming to tell you that since we will have this big election, we don't know what will happen. And that's the reason why I have come here to invite you again to the event this evening, 5:30, at the Brings Center at St. Ignatius High School, the campaign to end homelessness. Because if HUD is going to be eliminated completely or will be like putting more constraints, limits, we will have a harder time. So we do have to do something about this. So please come. The other thing is, this past Monday morning, I went to the county controlling board meetings. I told them honestly, I was there to show my objection because since last year, I personally delivered the hard copies of the documents to show you that shelter has a problem, especially the one on Payne Avenue. And you guys started paying attention, and even you guys granted a public hearing to hear out what's going on. And that was very helpful, and lots of residents in that shelter really appreciated that. But the thing is, finally, we were told the same service provider got the contract renewed again for another year. So lots of people, actually, we feel we were punked. So I went there to tell them that. I say, well, I guess this contract probably passed again as a no-bid contract with no bid bond, no performance bond, not even a James bond. That's what I said exactly there. The other thing I just found out from this presentation, I did not know what this board was about that much, but since they mentioned it, I would like to know if this board can help the people who are already in the shelters, not in the regular community, not in their homes, going to regular high school. These people are already in the shelter because we do have residents with autism. One of them was very brave. She came to the public hearing on May 4th that day. Mr. Jones was so considerate, calm her down, telling her no hurry, giving her the time for her to express herself. And later, other residents came up to talk. They actually told all of you that particular person was the one with autism. Her situation is really bad because her father is her payee, getting her disability checks, but she's not getting any money. Her father used the money for drugs, women, alcohol, and other stuff. We don't know what kind of help we can give her, but shelter by itself cannot help her to solve this problem for long term. So she cannot get her housing finalized either because her father is kind of still guardian payee situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If nothing else holds our attention, any other public comments?
No, Mr. Chair.
Again, if no other public comments, our meeting is adjourned.